So I bring on Ariel Helwani for many reasons. He is the foremost authority on MMA and all sorts of things that I don't understand. Also because I've been obsessed. What I bring to the table today in this episode of Share and Tell is this video that I watched from my couch of Ariel on a stage in between Logan Paul and Dillon Danis. And I want to get to the genre of what they engage in these days because that's a bigger picture topic. But the micro of this is just this press conference that devolved very rapidly and which Ariel was ahead of, seemingly, before anybody else, if we can watch that clip. So this is Logan Paul, underhand chucking a bottle of something at Dillon Danis's...
Of Prime, I assume.
Of Prime, presumably.
Assume it's Prime.
And Katie, where would you say that struck Dillon Danis?
In the penis.
Hit him in the penis.
Right in the penis.
That's what it looked like.
It was below the belt.
Yeah.
And then Dillon Danis, Ariel, how would you describe what you saw? Because he takes his microphone and then does what?
Yeah, well, I didn't see all of that because as you can see in the clip, I got the hell out of there. And a lot of people were making fun of me. I'm like, yo, you think I want to get... if there's another angle, if I would have stayed exactly where I was originally, I would have been pelted in the head
100%.
with a water bottle.
Yeah.
So I'm totally okay with being the scaredy cat who goes off. I actually thought I was very calm, cool, and collected about it. I just said, you know what? I'm out of here. Walked there to the left.
I do
L
think
cut.
you did a little bit of hand stuff that
Okay, so
made
that's the
you
thing.
look like
No,
not
you know what?
cool, calm, collected. You
It's
did do a little bit of
very
like
unfair.
Ooh.
It's very unfair. If you roll the tape back,
Which we
I'm
will,
fixing my
repeatedly.
IFB. Look, I'm fixing
your
my
I-
IFB,
oh,
and then
but-
he hits me.
But this,
So that's why I did that. Had I not been fixing my IFB in that moment, I would have never done that. I would have been unflappable
you were
in that
here,
moment.
and then you went to.
I feel like...
Yeah, I was here, and then I went to here, and that's called good defense.
Yeah,
That's Philly
yeah,
shell right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
That's good defense.
Ariel was shoulder rolling as soon as that
Yes.
water bottle flew across the stage.
Thank you for that, Pablo.
That said, the other verb I'd use is scamper. There was a scampering.
a scurrying.
It felt like, Ariel, you've done this before, though. The face-off, the press conference, before a fight. And you had veteran savvy about where you wanted to not be, I guess.
Yeah.
I wanted nothing. I'm not fighting. I'm not courageous like them. I want nothing to do with any of that. And these two guys have had their moments. In August, they had a press conference and cake was being thrown and water bottles were being thrown back there too. I want nothing to do with any of this. I just want to go there, do my job, come home to my family. There's no part of me that wants to be a hero and say, I took a water bottle to the face. So people were making fun of me for getting out of the way. I wish I got out of the way quicker. I went to hide behind the ring girls. So that's how I wanted nothing. I was like, there's no way they're going to throw anything at them. So let me just hide behind. I have no problem being a total coward in this
Amazing.
moment.
Human shields.
Yep, you're that guy in the movie that takes the woman and it's like, no, take her, not me.
Yeah. Like
beautiful.
George Costanza when there's a fire in the
Yes.
apartment,
Yeah,
and he's like
shoving
knocking
old
over
ladies.
the old people. That was me, and I am totally okay with that. But to answer your question though, Pablo, he took a microphone and he nailed Logan in the head with it. Dillon did, and then he cut him open. And it was very unfortunate because, there's an actual fight that needs to happen on Saturday. So for a minute there, I was looking at the executives. They look like, they had the fear of God in their eyes because now all of a sudden this multi-million-dollar fight was potentially up in smoke because of this hijinks. In the end, though, it didn't matter. Everyone was okay. But that's some scary stuff.
Well, I want to follow up on that framing because this is a thing that had millions upon millions of dollars on the line. It's real big business now. And he also pointed out that you, as a professional, want to do professional things. You want to go, show up, do your job, and you doing your job at, what do we call this genre now, Ariel? This was a professional boxing fight, but this was Logan Paul, YouTuber influencer versus Dillon Danis, who, Katie, I don't even know if you know.
I have no idea who that is.
So please explain what the
Okay. So Dillon Danis is actually an incredible Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's a black belt. He's had great success in the BJJ world. Then he met a guy named Conor McGregor, and his profile grew a lot, and he sort of adopted some of Conor's persona. He's only had 2 MMA fights, and they were very low-level fights for an organization called Bellator. But his last fight was in 2019. He suffered a serious knee injury. He's been out for a while, but what he's really good at is being a crap talker. He's a troll. And anytime there's something on any major Instagram or Twitter account about the Paul brothers, he would always be talking crap about them, that he would beat them up, that he would knock them out, et cetera, et cetera. He was scheduled to fight a guy named KSI, who was in the main event of this event, who's Logan's business partner in Prime, who's a huge deal in England, in January. He pulled out a week before. At that point, his Q rating couldn't have been lower. Everyone was like, oh my God, Dillon, like you talk all this crap. You didn't even show up to fight KSI, the rapper. Like you couldn't even fight that guy. You're not a real fighter. Logan now, WWE wrestler, killing it all over the place. He's making a ton of money. He says he wants to box. He picks Dillon. When I heard about this, I actually saw Logan at an event in August, and I said, why would you pick Dillon? His Q rating is so low. Why are you giving him this platform? He's like, it's an easy fight, blah, blah, blah. Well, what ended up happening was Dillon, being the troll that he is, took his trolling into overdrive and ended up really picking a fight with Dillon's fiance, a woman by the name of Nina, and went on this 2-month onslaught.
This is where I noticed it. Was that my algorithm began feeding me this man's
it was insane.
War on former SI swimsuit model and tabloid, I guess, sub character Nina Agdal. And
I know that name.
And it got, I mean, Ariel, how extreme did it feel relative to your
Insane.
expectations for all of this?
No, it got way too personal, and it was gross, and he gained 800,000 followers on Twitter and all that stuff. What ended up happening, though, initially when this fight was announced, I was like, oh, I get it. I get it now. Logan's trying to knock out the guy that everyone hates to troll online. And let's be honest, Logan is polarizing, and there's some people who hate him, and now they're going to love him. But what ended up happening was that Dillon became the babyface, guys. Babyface is the pro wrestling term for good guy. And what ended up happening was all these people on Twitter who are maybe sad, depressed, can't get a girl, I don't know what it is, started cheering him on to harass this poor woman who had nothing to do with this even more. So he would post these pictures and videos, and it was getting really ugly. Now she's suing him, and it's just it's turned into this whole thing, and it got way too personal. But what ended up happening was it drew a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention to the fight.
Yeah.
And so when we got to Manchester last week, it felt like that was the main event. It wasn't, but it felt like it.
That wasn't the main event?
It wasn't the main event. It was the co-main event. It was the second to last fight, but it felt like Logan was going to rip his head off, and who could blame him? It became very, very personal.
Ariel, to your point, right? What this did was promote the fight.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the juice, I love combat sports, boxing specifically, because humiliation, ego, the ruining of a man's sense of self is on the line. This one, it just felt real, the enmity, the stakes were that real. And so what happened?
Okay, so it was really real. And it's interesting that you bring up humiliation, because that ended up playing a big factor in how the fight went. The fight ended up being a total bust, because what happened was Dillon Danis, who hasn't fought in 4 years, spent the first 2 rounds like this. He didn't throw a single punch. In fact, he only landed 9 punches throughout the entire 6-round fight. When I was watching it and I was commentating for DAZN, I said, you know what? Yeah, I understand what he's doing. He's trying to tire out Logan. Logan's got big muscles. He's not a professional boxer, so maybe he's trying to let him unload everything, and then he'll pour it on come the third. And in fact, his coach confirmed that was the game plan. The problem was, at the end of the second, Logan actually rocked him, and I think Dillon then in his mind said, I'm not going to get humiliated by this guy. I'm not going to get knocked down. I'm not going to get knocked out. I'm going to get a moral victory and say that I survived his best shots, and I'm not going to put myself in any kind of harm or trouble to potentially get knocked out by him. And then he took it one step further and just wanted to create a moment, a viral moment, a meme, if you will.
Ew.
So he tried to get him in a guillotine. He tried to do a takedown. He tried to do stupid stuff. But in the end, he only kind of really embarrassed himself and didn't end up doing anything of note. And then at the end, when it got all crazy, Logan's bodyguard jumped in the ring and it turned into a huge brawl.
Again.
Logan ended up winning via DQ. It was kind of a
mess.
It was a bit of a sham.
Who
unfortunately.
is
It was
the
a mess.
governing body of this fight?
It's a great question. This is a great question. So this was under an umbrella, an organization called Misfits Boxing. Now this is fascinating, guys, because Misfits is this boxing organization that is owned by KSI and a guy named Mams Taylor, who was once big in the music industry. And I couldn't believe, I'd never been to one of their events, but to answer your earlier question, Pablo, what is this? It's not boxing. You cannot call it boxing. It's sort of like, you know how professional wrestling has the word wrestling in there, but it really has nothing to do with collegiate or Olympic wrestling?
Mm-hmm.
It's crossover or influencer boxing. You must always call it that. Crossover or influencer boxing. It's a whole different thing. But you know what blew me away?
I didn't know that.
When I went there, I was at Tank Garcia in April in Las Vegas. I was at Spence Crawford, two of the biggest boxing matches.
Real boxers.
Right. But come the co-main event, those nights, there probably wasn't 1,000 people at T-Mobile Arena. No one was in the arena. No one cared. On Saturday in Manchester, before the first fight, and I think that there were a total of 11 or 12 fights on this card. Before the first fight, it was probably 60 to 70% full. Before the first fight on the main card, 6-fight main card, it was 100% full. You don't see this in anything but the UFC. And where this was different than the UFC was, I couldn't believe how many young kids were there. It was more of a WWE crowd than a UFC crowd. There were 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds with their dad. And so what I try to explain to my audience who gets so upset when they see this stuff, this is a sham, this is an example that boxing is dead, blah, blah, blah. This isn't for me. This isn't for you, Pablo. This isn't for the traditional combat sports fan.
It's for me.
There is a massive audience of young kids that love this stuff, and they know all the characters, and they're obsessed with them from top to bottom, and they know their stories, and they subscribe to them on YouTube and on TikTok and all this stuff. It's a whole other universe that we don't know anything about, and it was just fascinating to witness it all.
But the idea that we don't know anything about it, I do want to challenge you on that, because it feels like the reason partly why it's so successful is because the skill set, Ariel, the skill set of how to sell a fight, how to create juice, how to create that like crackling sensation of like, man, I wonder what happens. What happens in this fight we're about to see. It feels like the comment section or the Twitter thread, the world of influencer YouTuber is such a natural farm system for at least that part of combat sports, right? The promotion of it.
It is, and it uses those elements of, oh, I like this guy, I hate that guy, I'm emotionally invested in this guy, I want to see this guy beat his ass, I want to see this guy lose. But ultimately, like, they're not pro boxers.
Right.
You know, those,
it's all sizzle. There's no stake. Doesn't it feel like it's once it gets down to the fight, there's never a fight that you're like, wow, what a fight.
Some of them actually, to be fair, some of them were good, but I would just never, they were novices. It was like seeing, like, there was one fight on that card which was crazy, but I have to admit, for what it was entertaining. It was tag team boxing. It was like
I don't even know
what? 2-on-2. It was 2-on-2 with one guy standing outside. Like, they are trying to redefine.
So they have
this
to name
world.
it. I think they have to name it something. I think it has to become
call it
its
crossover
own.
boxing.
They should call it Celebrity Deathmatch.
That was a good show back in the day.
think
Be a
they could call it
claymation Judge Mills Lane.
Yeah. I just think that, like, I don't know, celebrity in the definition of the way they use it on TV when it's a show of people, you know, like Celebrity Jeopardy.
Yeah.
It's like
Katie
not really
stares
celebrity.
into the camera.
No, but it just feels like it doesn't bum you out at all. I know you said there's young kids and that it's for them, it's not for us, but it doesn't make you go like, hey, this was a real thing. And now in this time when clearly the boxing landscape and fight sport landscape is changing with like Showtime is now out of the game.
Yep.
Doesn't it make you get a little bit
don't you
where's
worry,
it going?
Don't you worry that somewhere Jeremy Schaap is weeping? Ariel, just like, look,
Jeremy.
The idea though,
the
to Katie's point though, the idea of like we're over-indexing on sizzle and we're selling stuff. And it reminds me of like truly the problems sports faces macroeconomically and macroculturally, which is, wow, all these people are talking about this on social, but how do we actually make this into like a product? And it feels like here, they're at the very least getting people to want to know what's in the box, right? And I just wonder, is that sustainable? Does this feel like a real business that you'll be covering for a long ass time?
No. This is not. You know, there are actual people that cover this. This is their beat. This is not my beat. I kind of pop in and out when there's like a connection to the MMA, you know, traditional combat world. Dillon Danis, MMA fighter, etc. You know, when Jake Paul fights an Anderson Silva or Nate Diaz, like that's my world crossing over. But I'm not going to cover Misfits 11, their next event next month, because it doesn't do it for me. And there's enough MMA and boxing and other things to cover. It doesn't bum me out, Katie, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't feel like boxing is in the gutter like people like to think it's in the gutter or say it's in the gutter. In fact, boxing has had one of its best years in recent memory with the likes of Tank Garcia and Spence Crawford and Canelo coming over and having his big fight just a couple of weeks ago. And there are big fights to come, Henny Prograis in December. Like, I could go on and on about boxing. And so it's just, how do you want to deal? It's almost like talking to someone who writes for a major newspaper and say, doesn't Twitter bum you out? Doesn't it bum you out that people just want things in bite-sized form like that? This is just a sign of the times.
But this is why this specific sport, if we're calling it that with scare quotes, why it's so fascinating, it's because here you can see on some level, you can get the guilty pleasure of like, Well, yeah, I'm going to click on this highlight of this guy getting his ass beat because I also know that guy to be a shitty person based on all of his documented behavior in ways that are real and legally troubling and worrisome for the future of, I don't know, the American conscience as regards like how do we treat women? And there I'm just like, on some level though, Ariel, I imagine a click is a click, right? Like this is sort of the we will take all eyeballs philosophy of how to promote something.
Yeah, and that gets the most amount of eyeballs. But I could tell you, like, there's a main event in the UFC this weekend involving a guy named Alex Volkanovski, who's like the type of person that I want my kids to be a fan of, who's a father of 3, who his biggest vice is that he likes to, cook chicken wings and put like Cheetos around it or something. Like the guy's like a salt of the earth mensch. You know what I mean? So there's enough out there that's good and wholesome in the fight game. You just have to find it. And unfortunately, those people typically don't make the big bucks, don't get the attention, and don't get people, all crazy going, oh my God, this is an indictment on the state of the fight game. It's not. There's always going to be crazy characters. There's always going to be good guys and bad guys. And it's just up to you to find the ones that you want to root for. It's sort of like, Tim Duncan was just like a soft-spoken dude, right? And there are some people who appreciated that, and then there were other people who just, liked the bad boys more.
Oh, Ariel, Tim Duncan would be a terrible influencer.
Oh, he would be terrible. Yes,
but what would be better. I have solutions oriented.
Yeah.
These guys should cover themselves. Both Tim Duncan and this gentleman, featherweight champion of the world, Alex Volkanovski, should walk into the ring covered in Cheeto dust.
Done. Love
that.
He's so good.
Try to lay a hand on him. Try it.
Try your best.
Yeah. Then go home and touch your couch. See how that felt.
Don't touch your eye.